Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we're going to talk a little bit about Slaanesh's image problem. So, since kicking off my Emperor's Children project, I've been looking at lots of kind of different, other people's armies, like artwork, all of that stuff, just stuff to try and get a bit more inspiration for what I want to do, see if there's anything that I outright want to just, steal. I mean, let's be honest, that's sometimes the best way of finding a kit bash or conversion that you want to do. You just see someone else do it and go, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And kind of looking through all of that stuff has kind of reminded me of the sort of weird place that Slaanesh is in general. Maybe not so much in terms of where Games Workshop is, but the kind of view that a lot of people seem to have towards the way Games Workshop treats Slaanesh and why. There is a fairly overwhelming consensus at the moment, and there has been for some time, that Games Workshop is kind of distancing themselves from the imagery associated with Slaanesh. The imagery being, of course, essentially just sex, and that's it. Which is an annoying thing, to be honest, with Slaanesh, because to my mind, excess is not just about one thing. It's about the kind of maximum, the extreme of all things. So, but this is where part of the image problem lies. The kind of popular, most kind of, I guess, easy interpretation of excess is wanting to fuck anything that moves, basically. Just full-on debauchery, that sort of thing. That's fine. That's an obvious part of excess, and in fact is the part that I think really Games Workshop may have focused on a little bit too much when designing Slaanesh-based things like the Demonettes and the Seekers and all of that shit. Really, though, for me, the Emperor's Children especially, it's excess in all forms, not just in that form. That's why when I come to make my the Noise Marines, I will be hunting high and low for as many kind of speaker-based bits as possible. The armour is going to be a complete riot of colour. I mean, it describes in the Horus Heresy book Fulgrim very nicely what, for me, is the most rounded interpretation of excess. It's not the kind of very one-dimensional thing of, it's all about sexual pleasure and that's it. It's so much more than that, because there's different interpretations of it, isn't there? For a start, the armour is described as being like a riot of colour, just loads of clashing hues, just slapped on everywhere. Things like cloaks go from being cloth material to being skin to, there being like flayed skin draped over the armour. It's kind of turning everything up to 11 and then finding, 11 just feels like 1 now, and then we need to turn it up to 12. 12 only feels like 1. It's that constant 1 up of, this is perfect. Oh no, it's been there for 40 seconds and now I need more. It's the same with the description of music in Fulgrim as well. The fact that it goes from, Emperor's Children and Fulgrim in particular finding, how do you pronounce her name? Is it Bekwa? Bekwa? I can't remember the second name, but the composer from that book. It goes from being, her work is superlative and the best of its type, and that is enough. But then it becomes not just superlative, the best of its type. Fulgrim needs to listen to like 18 different songs at once, blasted at full volume, just to get the same level of enjoyment that he did out of a single song that was the best of its kind. That's what excess should be. The thing is, Games Workshop haven't really leaned into that, and I think that's probably because at the time of creating Slaanesh, and at the time of creating the imagery for Slaanesh, those kind of things weren't that high on the list. Like, they weren't that high up on the agenda. The actual fleshed out nature of it hasn't come until much later. Yes, Slaanesh has had Noise Marines for a hell of a long time. But whilst they are iconic to 40k forces in terms of, Chaos Marines who follow Slaanesh, they're also basically just Chaos Marines with sonic weapons, and that's it. There's, it didn't feel like it was particularly fleshed out. That has come later. When you look at the actual demonic side of Slaanesh, the issue that I think seems to have happened is that Excess has been interpreted as being just that one-faceted thing. That's why all of Slaanesh's demons are lithe and skinny, and they are based on the idea of like the succubus. It's that kind of vibe. Yes, there are like crab claws going on, but really, what difference does that make? The overall shape, the silhouette, the presentation is, it's overtly sexualized, but in a nightmarish way, which does suit Slaanesh. But it also only serves to emphasize one particular facet of Excess, which is what Slaanesh is all about. The thing is, at this point, I can easily see why Games Workshop wouldn't want to fully commit to creating, to doing a rerun of, the bare-chested demonettes, all of that stuff. I can see why they'd want to avoid that, because it's not just a case of, you want to appeal to as many people as possible. It's also, honestly, I'm going to say a little unimaginative. When you look at the overall kind of direction that fantasy has gone, in that it's gone and you now have Age of Sigmar, when you look at some of the stuff involved in that now, I think the time of just these are sexy demons, I think that's past. I think more could be done to interpret that. The problem is that it's so entrenched now, and it's the go-to. It's the general... It's become what you expect to see from demonic forces of Slaanesh. There's not really anything else that you particularly call to mind when thinking of that army. Actually, you could probably get away with a lot more, and a lot more interesting stuff. There's a whole avenue of, exploration to be taken in terms of what the Emperor's Children have done, for instance. The actual changing of flesh, the experimentation on themselves, the work of Fabius Bile. Now, obviously, that is 40k based. That's not exactly linked 100% to the demonic forces of Slaanesh. But the attitude could be. It could be extended and still be completely within the reasonable kind of realm of what Slaanesh would do, or the things that those who follow Slaanesh would appreciate. Like, it's made very clear that the Emperor's Children quite quickly fall into using the flayed skin of slaves, cultists, enemies they've defeated in battle. You don't see that represented on the demonic side of Slaanesh. It's made very clear that one of the kind of biggest things for the Emperor's Children is the actual kind of the sound element of it. Getting reactions, getting pleasure from sound, the overwhelming kind of effect it has on them and their constant chase after that. Again, it's not really something that's properly explored in the demonic side of Slaanesh. There's also the visual aspect as well. The Emperor's Children, absolutely, unless you look at the official artwork for them for God knows how long, where they're just pink and black, which is boring as fucking not at all. Even when I was younger and I didn't know a huge amount about the Emperor's Children, it still struck me as being weird that they were all about the excess, and yet their idea of that was, let's paint some of our armour pink. That was always a bit weird to me. The fact that it's then been expanded on, and now we have the actual descriptions of Emperor's Children making their armour as garish and awful as possible, I'm right behind that. Again though, that is an element of Slaanesh that is simply not explored in the demonic lineup. So you've got this weird kind of thing whereby Slaanesh is well established, but it's well established with an image that Games Workshop established themselves. And to most people, it looks as though Games Workshop doesn't want to be associated with that image that they themselves have created. And so it kind of feels as though Slaanesh is just on the sidelines. It's not really getting any attention. There's not really anything being done to improve it, to bring it up to date, to bring it in line with what we're seeing for things like Thousand Sons, Death Guard, or alternatively Tzeentch and Nurgle. I mean, especially Nurgle. When you look at some of the stuff that's happened in Age of Sigmar for Nurgle, there's been some really cool stuff that's gone on there. We've had things like the Idoneth Deepkin, we've had the steampunk dwarves, we've had a huge expansion of Khorne-based stuff. Tzeentch has had a little bit of an expansion. Slaanesh is just sort of there, not really doing anything, not really being brought up to date, and it is down, I think, genuinely to the problem of image. You know, when people say, "Oh, Games Workshop don't want to touch it because it's not, you know, it's not appropriate for what they're trying to do," I think there is a very serious element of truth to that. But at the same time, it's something that they have done themselves, and the thing that gets me is that I don't think it's that difficult to fix. You could still retain the kind of overall visual style of the Slaanesh demons. You could achieve that whilst also expanding the range to actually take into account all the other elements of excess that have been explained so well in so many different books and in so much lore that is currently completely lacking from that range. Because it is completely lacking from the range. There's no hint of kind of audio or visual elements of excess. There's nothing in the way of the kind of representation of like the appetite for excess. I mean, that's something else as well. Things like Nurgle is well known to be, you know, the realm of the large bloated marine, the large bloated demon. Eating to excess is something that is entirely possible, and it's all part of overindulgence, which Slaanesh is a huge part of. There's so many ways it could be taken, and there's so many ways it could be interpreted, all of them still true to what Slaanesh is and should be, without having to just rely on, hey look, it's a half-naked woman with crab claws. You could just do so much better. And it's such a weird thing to think about, that is the image problem that Slaanesh seems to have for Games Workshop, and yet they made that image. They created it. They have since had, you know, good writers come along and expand on the concept of Slaanesh and actually present ways in which excess can be played out. But the actual line for Slaanesh, the actual demons of Slaanesh, don't do anything to represent that, which is kind of off. And I'd really like them to just do something with it, you know? I'd kind of like them to actually take the time, make the effort to make Slaanesh what it should be. Tzeentch has had a huge update. Nurgle has had a huge update. Khorne has, in Age of Sigmar terms, had a huge update in that, you know, the first starter set for Age of Sigmar was Khorne stuff, and there's been a load of Khorne releases since. 40k maybe not so much. I mean, we did have the Khorne Demonkin Codex, which was quite clearly a kind of alpha version of what became the Thousand Sons and Death Guard codexes. But Slaanesh has just been kind of languishing in relative obscurity. I'd quite like them to sort out whatever image issues they're having with that particular faction and actually do something with it, because Slaanesh is one of the more interesting gods, one of the more interesting concepts, and there's a lot in there that could be explored that currently there just isn't much being explored at all. And it's a shame, because it could be so much more than it is. Anyway, that was just a little bit of essentially just thinking out loud, because I've been thinking about this stuff for a couple of weeks now. Just let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you agree with me? Do you think that the line could do with an update? Do you prefer it just being that kind of relatively one-dimensional thing it is now? Or do you think there is so much more they could pull from to actually create an interesting and unique faction out of them that is maybe a bit more original than just a bunch of Succubus and that's it? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. There's various things to click. There's like video, Patreon, subscribe, all that stuff. Click it if you like. Don't click if you don't want to. And I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.